So many pet parents are losing trust in store-bought pet food companies, but making balanced food at home is extremely difficult. I struggled with this for years until I developed a foolproof system to make 14 dog meals in less than 1 hour. So in this video, I'm walking you through the step-by-step process to creating balanced, vet-approved dog food at home that's quick and cheaper than store-bought. Plus, at the very end, I'm gonna break down the exact price of this specific recipe because I feel like not enough people talk about the true cost of feeding dogs like this. Now, this recipe is gonna be a little bit different than recipes we've done in the past because what we usually do is we'll just cook the beef and the grains, and then with the supplements and seafood and veggies, we blend those. We don't cook them, and then we combine the two at the end. But this time, we're gonna be adding every single ingredient to a slow cooker to make it easier on ourselves. So here's all the supplies you're gonna need. Slow cooker, obviously. You're gonna need a scale and a plate so you can actually weigh out your items because we're gonna be very specific with our ingredient amounts today. A food processor, fantastic for blending up whole vegetables, organ meat, all the stuff that picky dogs might not wanna eat if they're super chunked up. Now, if you don't want to use a food processor, you can absolutely use a knife and a cutting board. It's just going to be a little more work for you. And lastly, one big giant spoon for stirring and portioning, which we'll be doing later. Now, this recipe can absolutely be done on the stovetop or even in the oven. I will say your cook times are going to change depending on how high of a heat you're using, but the slow cooker method I have found is probably one of the easiest because it's kind of just set and forget until it's fully done. Now, the first ingredient we're going in with is some 90-10 ground beef. We like to lean a little more lean with our ground beef. We don't want too many of the calories coming from fat itself, and ground beef is gonna make up the bulk of this recipe at about 29% of the entire thing. Is gonna be our 3 1/4 pounds of ground beef. Next up, we're gonna go in with our 18 eggs. And what I'm gonna do with these is crack them into a separate bowl so I can actually scramble them up first. I've done them just in the slow cooker and it kind of is hard to get it all incorporated. Now, one of the most common things we get asked when people see us give our dogs eggs is why we don't include the shell, because the shell is a fantastic source of calcium. And it's because we usually always use other calcium sources like bone meal, which you'll see here in a little. But if you're already feeding a complete and balanced food, like fresh food, kibble, whatever it is, it already has all the calcium that your dog needs in it. And by adding more calcium, what we can do is create these really hard, white, chalky poops that are not fun for dogs to pass. So there are great toppers out there, but an isolated nutrient like calcium is not one that your dog needs extra of. Now, that being said, if you're creating a homemade recipe that uses eggshells as the calcium source, fantastic. No issues with that. I highly recommend it. But again, we just don't want excess calcium. Now, the eggs are gonna make up the next largest portion of the meal at around 17.2% of this entire recipe. So we're gonna go in with these. The cool thing about eggs too is they are considered a complete protein, meaning they have all the amino acids that our dogs need. So just a wonderful protein source. I love using eggs anytime I can. Next up, we're gonna process our vegetables. So now I'm gonna bring in the food processor. Now, with our vegetables, I am a huge advocate for buying them frozen. A lot of times they're cheaper, they're easier to deal with, they're more convenient to store, and I've heard they preserve nutrients better because these are frozen at peak harvest, whereas the fresh ones we get have kind of been sitting out for a while and those nutrients can start to degrade. So the first thing we're going in with is actually our broccoli here. Anytime you have dark green vegetables like this, spinach, kale, they're gonna be very high in antioxidants, which are fantastic for our dog's health. These are also high in fiber, so if your dog is experiencing some not great poops or maybe their anal glands aren't being expressed, adding some fiber to their diet can actually help with that. And each of the different vegetables here, we're gonna do broccoli, spinach, and peppers, all make up about 11% of the overall diet itself. And so like broccoli, I know I need 19.81 ounces. This is 16 ounces, so it's gonna be a bag and a little bit. You'll notice with this, I start with a very specific recipe for a reason. I wanna make sure my dogs are getting all the nutrients, but I'm also not gonna measure out every single thing. I've kind of been making recipes for a while and I know about how much I need of each thing. If you're feeling a little worried about it though, don't be afraid to bust out that scale because that's how you exactly ensure all the nutrients are going into your dog that they need. Now, another thing is you don't have to blend up all of these vegetables and stuff if you don't want. Because we're cooking them, because we're cooking them, they're still going to have that cell wall broken down so our dogs can actually absorb them properly. But this is what we do because our dogs don't like super big chunks of vegetables or even like organ meat. So I like to pulverize as much as I can before we add it into the slow cooker. Now, the cool thing about these recipes that we design is we use a specific formulator that allows us to see the exact nutrient makeup. So the fiber, the protein, the fat, all the different levels of the vitamins and minerals. And if you buy our guide down in the description below, we include all of that for all 10 recipes. And why that's cool is because if you have a vet that's worried about what you're feeding, you can take this to them and say, hey, here's the complete breakdown, and they can look at it and maybe say, you know, hey, based on your dog's situation, let's make these adjustments. But we want this to be a collaborative effort with our vets. We used to be a bit like, don't tell your vets you're feeding homemade food, but we need to tell them, we need to bring them into this process because it's only gonna benefit our dogs at the end of the day. Next up, we have our beef liver. So we're gonna bring back the food processor so we can blend this up so our dogs actually eat it. Now, organ meat can sometimes get a little tough in the food processor. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of cut this up a little bit to make it a little easier. You know, scissors aren't sharp enough. We're just gonna go for it. Just gonna do a little towel wrap. These are not necessarily waterproof. Better. Guys, gotta hold on! So then that kind of turns it into this like paste-like substance. And then our dogs are actually gonna eat this because it will be very easily incorporated into the rest of this and hidden. Now, another question I'm sure many of you are asking right now is, won't we have nutrient loss because we're cooking it? And yes, we will. No matter what you do, if you're cooking something, you're gonna have some nutrient loss. But that's the other cool thing about the recipes we develop is we're accounting for that nutrient loss. So all of these ingredients that are gonna be degraded a little bit as we cook them have been inflated a little bit when we add them in here so that when they're fully cooked, they end up at the same levels that our dogs need. Next up, we have our sardines. These are gonna be great for omega-3 fatty acids. which is fantastic for skin and coat health as well as brain function. But the primary reason we're using these is for their vitamin D content. These and the eggs are really what makes up that vitamin D in this recipe. And I like to include the liquid. These are no salt added, so I'm not worried about any excess salt. And that liquid's got a lot of the nutrients that we want in it. The sardines and the beef liver both make up about 6% of the recipe each. Next up, we have our oysters. These are gonna make up a tiny percentage of the overall recipe. They actually make up about 1% of this recipe itself. These are in salt though, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drain the liquid and I'm gonna rinse them, and then I'll add in our 1.96 ounces. And one thing I forgot to mention about those oysters is they're primarily used to take care of the zinc in our recipe. Very high in zinc. Next up, we have our bone meal powder. This is gonna be our main calcium source for the recipe, and I need about 18 teaspoons because 1 level teaspoon is approximately 2.8 grams. We need 52 grams. And that bone meal itself is gonna take up even less than 1% of the overall diet, so we're really just using a small amount for its calcium. Next up, we have hemp hearts. These are gonna take up, again, less than 1% of the overall diet, and these are to help meet those linoleic acid requirements. One thing I forgot earlier is our barley. We're going in with just some regular Italian barley. This is also going in uncooked. We're gonna rely on the liquid and stuff in there to cook it. And this isn't really to meet any nutrient requirements. We're primarily using this to add some fiber to the diet because fiber is essential. $11 ounces. This one was 9. So just a little bit extra of this. Now, you'll notice that on the ingredients that don't really provide a ton of nutritional value, I'm not overly concerned about being exact with them. But when it comes to something like the bone meal or the kelp that we're about to do or some of these other supplements, we want to be as close to exact as possible because they're so nutrient dense for what they offer. After barley comes our vitamin E liquid. We're going in with 9 drops of this. This is obviously to help meet vitamin E requirements, but vitamin E also extends the time that fats can be good before they go rancid. And I'm sure you can guess with 9 drops of this, it's well under 1% of the overall diet. After that, we have nutritional yeast. We're going in with 4 grams of this. Nutritional yeast is very high in vitamin B, various B vitamins, and it's not like bread yeast. It's gonna be a different type of yeast. Bread yeast can be very toxic to dogs. This one is not toxic. Don't need a lot of this at all. We only need 4 grams. 4 grams. And last but not least, we have some good old salt. Now we're just gonna use some regular table salt here. We're going in with 1 gram, and I wanna preface this by saying we're not adding this so it tastes better or it's a salty snack. This literally takes up 0.02% of the overall diet. It's just to help meet chloride requirements. So we're just going in with 1 gram. And 1 gram is hard, so I'm gonna bust out the tiny scale because I'm not confident that this one is going to read 1 gram. Now, everything is in our slow cooker. What I'm going to do is give this a good mix up, and then we're going to put this in our crock pot for probably 2 to 3 hours on low. It's really just gonna depend on your crock pot and how much food is in there. We just wanna make sure everything is fully cooked. We don't need it to be crispy or anything. Okay, So one thing I forgot to add is the kelp. So we're gonna do that real quick. Kelp's gonna take care of the iodine requirement, and I'm going in with about 11 of these teeny tiny scoops. Not gonna make up a huge portion of the diet at all. Okay, now that's actually ready to start cooking. Okay, so this food has been cooking for about 4 or 5 hours now. It ended up taking a little bit longer than I anticipated, but it is fully cooked through. The barley is nice and cooked, and it is ready to be portioned. So from here, you can do a few different things. You could use something like a Ziploc bag, which is gonna be your cheapest option. You could use something like a stasher bag, which is gonna be your reusable option. Obviously a little bit more expensive, but it's nice that these can be reused. And then the most expensive option, which is what we're using today, happens to be these glass Pyrex containers. And these are amazing because if you want, you can literally just feed your dogs out of these. But I will say they don't store overly well because, you know, if you only end up filling it about halfway, you're kind of wasting all that space, and then stacking all these in the freezer, it adds up. Okay, so from here, this is 1 week's worth of food for a 50-pound dog eating twice per day. So I'm gonna portion it into 14 different containers, and you can be exact with this if you want. What you could do is you could figure out how much the entire pot weighs. You could divide that by 7 or 14 to then portion it into your dishes. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it and try to get as close to an equal amount in each one as I can, because as long as our dog eats this within 7 days, they'll be getting all the nutrients that they need. Now real quick, one thing I want to point out is that this recipe is specifically designed for a 50-pound adult dog. If you want 10 different recipes tailored to your dog, or if you want to learn how to balance your own recipes at home, we have a guide that will teach you everything you need to know to get started. It has 2+ hours of video content. It teaches you everything from sourcing to balancing, and it's veterinarian endorsed. Dr. Nicole Rouse generously provided an endorsement after reviewing the guide and said, quote, "I'll be recommending this guide to many of my clients," unquote. If you're interested, the link is in the description below. It's something I'm very proud of. Now let's portion out this food. Now you'll notice that our water content turned out to be pretty good because there's no liquid left over at the end of the cooking. If there was, you would just want to make sure that that liquid gets into these various bowls, because in this cooking method, a lot of the nutrients leach out into the liquid, and we want to make sure those get into our dogs. Okay, it's time to break down the cost of this recipe while Harper eats this recipe. Like we said earlier, this makes 1 week's worth of food for a 50-pound dog, and it came out to a total of $47.78. This means that for 1 month, it would cost about $191 to feed your dog this recipe. I'm curious to know your opinion. Is this more or less than you thought it would be? Let us know down in the comments below, and while you're there, be sure to subscribe for more balanced pet food recipes just like this one. Now, homemade dog food is fantastic, but if we're not taking care of our dog's dental health, all of this can kind of be for nothing. So this video right here is going to show you the best dental chews, as well as the ones that could send your dog to the emergency room.